What's up, friends? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Please make sure to subscribe below if you have not already. We've got a few things that we need to get into before we get to our main topic, which is going to be Eric Stokes. It sounds like the Packers have a new cornerbacks coach, and they lost one of their key members of the personnel staff in the front office. Let's start there. They lose Chad Brinker. He's going to be the assistant general manager for the Tennessee Titans. This is somebody that they thought very highly of. He's basically done a little bit of everything. He has a scouting background. He's worked a little bit with Russ Ball as well on contracts and contract valuations. So this is definitely somebody, like I said, that the Packers have thought very highly of. He didn't really have a path in Green Bay. Russ Ball's not going anywhere. Brian Gutekunst isn't going anywhere, at least not as of right now. And usually how these things work is if all of a sudden Green Bay does clean house and all of a sudden Russ Ball and Brian Gutekunst are gone, usually their assistants are kind of gone with them. So there was really no opportunity for advancement for Brinker in Green Bay, and now he heads to the Tennessee Titans as their assistant GM. So there will definitely be a loss there, but I'm sure there will be some promotions in Green Bay, and they still have a very strong front office and staff that they can lean on moving forward. That brings us to the coaching side of things, where it does seem like they have found Jerry Gray's replacement. We don't know the official title, and it has not been made official as of yet. But according to Aaron Wilson, Greg Williams, the cornerback coach of the Arizona Cardinals, is going to be some part of the Packers defensive staff. Clearly, probably either the cornerbacks coach or defensive backs coach. We don't know if it's going to be cornerbacks coach or defensive back or secondary coach, or if it's going to have a passing game coordinator along with it. My guess is it's probably more of a cornerbacks coach, and then Ryan Downard will either move to secondary or safeties coach, and we'll see if somebody else gets the passing game coordinator title or if they just hold on that for a little bit. But either way, this is going to be the primary replacement for Jerry Gray. Greg Williams, this is not to be confused with the previous, or like the defensive coordinator, Greg Williams with two G's, who loves to play his safety 40 yards back, and of course was involved in Bountygate as well. Totally different Greg Williams. He has a great resume. So he's basically been a defensive backs coach in the NFL in some capacity since 2013. So this is not new to him. He started as the Chargers assistant secondary coach. Then he moved to Colts defensive backs coach, Broncos defensive backs coach, and then Cardinals cornerbacks coach more recently. He's worked under Vance Joseph for the last handful of seasons. That's kind of been his connection. Now, as far as results go, it'd be very tough to point to anything and be like, yes, this is what I'm super excited about and what Greg Williams is going to bring to the table. Truth be told, when it comes to coaching, who knows, right? Like it's so almost impossible to tell just what type of impact some of these coaches are having on a day-to-day basis. And all of those Cardinals corners could have been better because of him, for all we know. They could have been worse because of him, for all we know. It's just very, very tough to tell, and it's very tough to measure, especially when he's only there for less than a handful of seasons. He did get to work with Patrick Peterson, but if you look at the overall body of work in the corners in Arizona, it's a little bit of an uninspiring hire when you look at it that way. Patrick Peterson was starting to wind down his career. He moves to Minnesota, played better in Minnesota than he did in some of his final years in Arizona under Greg Williams. Rasul Douglas was there as a practice squad player. They didn't really find a role from there. Green Bay signs him off the practice squad, and the rest was history there. Byron Murphy has been fine, but hasn't really lived up to expectations, and you'd be hard-pressed to point to any other corner in Arizona and be like, wow, like look at that story. That was pretty incredible. I'm sure the coaches had something to do with that. So in some ways, a bit of an uninspiring hire. But like I said, the truth is your guess is as good as my guess, as good as anyone's guess as to what type of impact he's going to have. And it's going to be more of a wait and see. He does have great experience, as I mentioned. He's been in the league, in the NFL, in some defensive backs coach capacity since 2013, and has coached well before that as well. So we'll see. We'll see what he brings to the table. I thought there were better options out there that Green Bay could have looked at maybe a little bit more closely, but I think we're all just going to hope for the best and hope that he is able to bring a new brand of intensity to a cornerbacks group that, you know, sort of needs it. Jair at the end of the year kind of got his swagger back a little bit. Even Rasul, once he got to the outside, started to play much better than he did prior when he was playing in the slot and kind of out of position a little bit. But this is a position that with Rasul Douglas, assuming that he's back, Jair Alexander and Eric Stokes, maybe Keyshawn Nixon if he's back, this needs to be not only a strength of this defense, but it needs to be a strength of this team as well. And clearly the roster will be in flux, and we'll see if Rasul's back. That's not 1,000,000% a guarantee. We'll see if Keyshawn's back. That's certainly not a guarantee. And then there could be certainly a lot of spots up for grabs after that. Green Bay could get involved in the draft, certainly, and maybe even free agency as well there. But this is going to be like I said, a cornerbacks group that's going to have to be leaned on moving forward to be a real strength of this football team. And that brings us to our main topic for today, and that is Eric Stokes. First round pick in 2021, Eric Stokes. Let's put it this way. This team needs a very significant bounce back, not only from injury for Eric Stokes, but from his play on the field in 2022. He struggled mightily in 2022 before getting injured, and then had what was deemed a knee and ankle injury that he eventually had surgery on. There's been no real mention of what actually was injured. Was it an ACL? Was it an MCL? Was it something totally different? All we know is that it was a knee and ankle injury, and he did in fact have to have surgery on it. So the next question is when is he going to be ready? Was it something more serious? Was it an ACL? Is this something that we're going to have to wait, midway through next year? The fact that it was never reported as an ACL is probably good news, but we just don't know at this point as to what exactly the injury was and what the timetable is for him to return from that injury. But either way, when he does come back, it is so incredibly important that they get a much better ROI off of Eric Stokes than the direction that he was headed in the beginning of 2022 before he had the injury. I want to go through college Eric Stokes, what we saw in 2021, which was pretty darn good, what went wrong in 2022, and then what's needed from Eric Stokes in 2023 for him to be the impact player that I think Green Bay thought he could be coming into this league. Some of my notes when I watched him in college: clearly, he was fast, very athletic. I thought he could play off the line of scrimmage, play press coverage if he wanted to. Not only did he know how to use his speed down the field, but he had really great recovery speed as well. If he was beat, he had the ability to get back into play and make a play on the ball. I thought he was a little bit grabby at the top of his routes, didn't always trust his coverage, and that is a really big red flag usually when you're watching corners. Is if they don't trust themselves, what happens? Panic, they get grabby, they don't locate the ball, and they end up having issues at the point of attack, and receivers get big plays out of it. We saw some of that in his career so far, but more on that in just a moment. But that was on tape in college. And then I also thought that he struggled more with nuanced route runners. I compared him a little bit to Sam Shields, where I think Shields had a little bit better ball skills at the point of attack, but more of your straight line speed corner, somebody that can turn and run with you down the sidelines. But if you have the ability to be a shiftier route runner and get in and out of your breaks, you have the ability to give those type of corners a little bit more issue. Shields was probably a little bit better with that as well, but we saw that a little bit with Eric Stokes in 2021 and 2022, and that's just something that has been part of his game. Now, if you don't want to trust my scouting report, let's take a look at Lance Zierlein's from NFL.com. This was his sort of overarching scouting report on Eric Stokes coming out of college. Depending on scheme, need, or preference, Stokes offers teams the potential to play him outside or from the slot. I don't agree with that. I think he's an outside corner only, but I digress. Speed and quickness should allow him to stay with route runners or within closeout distance when he gets behind. Stokes played with better press technique in 2020, and he's willing to get physical near the goal line, but his play strength is below average. While there have been mild flashes of playmaking potential, he's more likely to play the receiver rather than attacking the football and looking for takeaways. He's twitchy in tight quarters with the potential to become more disruptive in zone. His size, speed, and athleticism could make him a day 2 pick as a future cornerback 3, but his weakness as a run defender will be challenged quickly by NFL offenses. That I very much agree with. So what did we see in 2021? We saw a rookie corner who was decently engaged as a run defender. Not great, but no glaring issues. It wasn't like he was avoiding contact or anything like that. It seemed he made a little bit more of a concerted effort as a rookie to get involved in the run game and at least be somebody who wasn't going to be a complete nightmare in that regard, which we saw in college, which was part of Lance's scouting report as well. We saw the speed, we saw the athleticism, we saw he could hang with NFL wide receivers, but what his big struggle with in 2021 was the catch point, kind of some of the things that showed up in his scouting report as well. It was when the ball was there and he was in a position, getting his head turned around and actually making a play on the ball. Justin Jefferson of the Vikings, he's going to make a lot of people look silly, but Justin Jefferson and the Vikings had a lot of success with him in Minnesota towards the end of the year, but it was something that he really struggled with all year long, was really the catch point and making a play on the ball and just some of those ball skills. Now, he had some great plays where he recovered. I think there was a Jamar Chase play, if I remember correctly, where he was able to get back in the play. And like I said, I thought overall it was a very, very nice rookie season. I thought he outperformed expectations, even though he was a first-round pick. What the scouting report said, I thought he looked more of like a true starting NFL corner, and it really looked like the future was bright for Stokes in Green Bay. And if he could continue to really hone his craft and become a professional NFL corner, the sky would potentially be the limit, to the point where you could really envision him being a true number one corner. I'm not saying like all-pro, Pro Bowl corner, but like a legitimate number one corner for a team in the NFL, which has just an immense amount of value, especially if you're playing opposite Jaire Alexander, who not only is a true number one already, but is one of the best corners in all of football. You put a legitimate number one corner across from him, and now you are really cooking in the secondary. So that was the hope, and we saw a lot of really positive signs out of Stokes in 2021. Then 2022 happened, and the play strength looked a lot worse. He was not physical at the point of attack. He looked like he had almost zero interest in the running game. He struggled with the ball skills and still struggled with receivers who were better at getting out of their breaks, and just ultimately took a pretty significant step back from what we saw in 2021. And this gave some flashbacks to some corners who maybe looked promising at times their rookie year. Quentin Rollins, Demarius Randall, Josh Jackson at times, who then fell off in year two and were just never the same after that. And that gave me a little bit of concern, because this has sort of been an issue for Packers corners that have been drafted high in the draft in, more recent seasons. So I have certainly some concern on what I saw on tape in 2022 and whether or not he can be right now. I'm just hoping he can get back to playing like a pretty decent number two corner. And if we can get to number one, great, but let's take some baby steps here. He needs to get back on the field, back from an injury that we don't know what it was, and playing much closer to the level that he played at in 2021 than what we saw in 2022. So maybe most importantly is, what does Eric Stokes need to do in 2023? I think the first thing is he has to play a more physical brand of football. You are from the University of Georgia. You are from the SEC. You know what's required of you. This cannot be a position. You are not in a position as Eric Stokes to just go out and be like, I'm only going to cover. I don't need to be one of those corners. Or I could be one of those corners that just needs to worry about my coverage, and I don't really need to get my hands dirty in the run game. You can't do that. Jaire Alexander's on this team. He's your number one corner. And just quite frankly, you're not good enough as a pure cover corner to be all Deion Sanders and be like, I'm paid to cover. I don't need to go get involved with that stuff. This is the modern day NFL. If you can't be a run defender, teams will seek you out and they will find you, and they will see if you're willing to get your hands dirty. And if you're not, they're going to run at you over and over and over and over again. We saw a little bit of that early in the season before he got injured. So he's going to have to play a more physical, intense brand of football. And going right along with that is he has to tackle better. This cannot continue to be a secondary that just really lacks from a tackling standpoint. They're going to have to figure out a safety, something with the safeties where they can tackle better. But listen, Jaire Alexander, not the greatest tackler anymore. As a rookie, he came out and in his first couple of years was a more tenacious run defender. I think the shoulder injury really gave him some hesitation in being a really physical run defender. And to be fair, Jaire is at that level where it's like, all right, we don't want you being too aggressive as a run defender. We need you out there to be one of the best cover corners in football. I'm not saying you can ignore it. I'm not saying you can't be a decent run defender, but like Jaire is no longer that guy that's super intense as a run defender. He's just not. And maybe you can argue he shouldn't be, but Jaire's not. Stokes isn't. Savage isn't. Your safeties are in flux. Like you just can't have that. So Eric Stokes has to be a better tackler, and he has to be far more engaged as a run defender. Next is he can't just rely on his speed. This can't be like, all right, I'm going to play on the outside. I'm going to be a vertical corner. If I get in-breaking routes or more nuanced route runners, it's going to be a struggle, and I'm just going to try my best to use my makeup speed to get back into play. That's not good enough for a former first-round pick. Like, he has to become, and this is my final note here, he needs to become a pro corner. This is the time where going from year 2 to year 3, your level of professionalism, your technique, your honing your craft and becoming a true pro, a pro's pro. Watch Jair Alexander. Watch how he practices, practice in and practice out, game in and game out, how he performs. He is a master at his craft. That is what you need to strive to be. Your footwork needs to be better. Your hand placement needs to be better. Your ability to jam at the line of scrimmage. Your ability to get your head around and make a play on the football. Those are all things that come with being a pro corner. I get that you were a physical freak in college, and because of that, even in the SEC, you could hang with most wide receivers, and even if you got beat, your makeup speed against college corners was enough to get you back in the play. That can't survive in the NFL. You have to become a legitimate pro corner that is bringing all of the tools, all of the essential cornerback skills to the table, especially when this team drafted you in the first round and is expecting big things out of you. It's time to really step up and be that corner that he has the capabilities of being, but he's going to have to do the little things a whole heck of a lot better and really become a master at his craft. And then from a defensive standpoint as well, it's going to be up to Greg Williams as well as Joe Barry to use Eric Stokes in the way that is best for him to be used. And I don't think this off-zone coverage for Jair and Stokes and Savage and these guys is really what's going to be best for this defense. I think they need to play a more physical brand of football at the line of scrimmage, bumping wide receivers, playing a little bit more man-to-man. But the other thing is listen, if Stokes isn't going to be a run defender, why is he on the field on early downs? Why is he ahead of Rasul Douglas as a base corner? Because Rasul Douglas can be a run defending corner, and you're not taking Jair off the field. So why is he in on base down? Why is he your number 2 corner? He shouldn't be. Until he can show that he is a true run defender, Rasul is my number 2 corner, assuming that he's back. He's going to be my guy on base downs. If I only have 2 corners in, it's going to be Jair and Rasul. And Rasul is going to be a little bit more physical at the point of attack and stop the run a little bit more. If it's a nickel down, but it's like 2nd and 5, 2nd and 3, and a run is a real legitimate chance, I'm going Rasul and Jair on the outside, and either Savage or Innis Gaines or a more physical corner that maybe they get in the draft or free agency is going to be in the slot. I'm not putting Jair in the slot in that situation because I don't want him banging around against tight ends and fullbacks. And I'm not ready to put Rasul Douglas back in the slot because that didn't work. And I'm not putting Eric Stokes in the slot because he can't tackle, and that's not going to be his best game either. So Rasul's on the outside, Jair's on the outside. That's going to be Innis Gaines or Darnell Savage if he's back, or whatever, more physical player in that slot corner position, because I don't trust Eric Stokes on the field in those situations. Now, when it's an obvious passing situation and you got your nickel defense in, now Jair can move inside, Stokes can move outside, Rasul is outside, and now you've got your 3 cornerback set and some obvious pass downs. But if it's a base down situation or there's a legitimate run pass option, until he proves otherwise, let's get Eric Stokes off the field. And that's okay. That's not like, this is like the NBA of like who's starting and who is my finishing lineup. The finishing lineup is the one that matters. Your 5 guys that are on the court with 3 minutes left in the game on the line. Who cares who started? Your best 5 are on the court when the game matters at the end. Like, who cares if you were the 6th man or the 5th man? Like, that stuff shouldn't matter. Same thing here. If Eric Stokes isn't a good run defender, get him off the field on rundowns. It's not that hard, especially when you have it's not like you're going from Eric Stokes to like some corner who just like can barely play corner, right? Like, I don't even know to give an example, but like, some just awful corner who can't actually hold up on the outside. You're going to Rasul Douglas instead. That is more than capable of playing corner on the outside, plus is a far better run defender. So put your better run defender on the field, and probably the better cover corner right now too in Rasul over Eric Stokes. So I think a move to sort of that number 3 cornerback in obvious passing situations, I think that gives Eric Stokes a little bit more motivation, and I think that just puts him in a better position to be successful, and that's okay. Like, if he can play that role extremely well on obvious passing downs and become more, just skilled as a pure cover corner, that would be a huge step for Eric Stokes in 2023. Green Bay has to get more ROI from their 3 first-round Georgia defenders, Quay Walker, Eric Stokes, and Devontae Wyatt. They can have a big step from those 3. These 3 were studs in college, University of Georgia, best defense in all of college football. And those 3 players were a really big reason why. They need to step up. They need to play huge. And this Packers defense needs those three to be the impact players that they were at the University of Georgia. And that includes and starts with a really big bounce back season from Eric Stokes. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all new show. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.